Hello friends, I never thought I'd be the kind of guy sharing my personal life online, but here I am, trying to untangle this mess and maybe get some perspective. My name's David. I'm 36, living in Chicago, working as a project manager for a construction firm. Life's been steady for the most part, not flashy, not boring, just comfortable. I met my wife, Emma, 8 years ago at a friend's barbecue. She was this fiery, ambitious marketing executive with a laugh that could light up a room. We hit it off instantly, started dating soon after, and got married within 2 years. I thought we were solid. We had our ups and downs, like any couple, but nothing that ever felt like a deal-breaker. Emma's career always had her on the move, networking events, late-night meetings, and occasional business trips to other cities. I never questioned it. Trust was the foundation of our relationship, or so I believed. She'd always been independent, and I respected that. I was proud of her success, proud to be the supportive husband while she climbed the corporate ladder. We didn't have kids yet, we were still enjoying our freedom, as she liked to put it. But we talked about it, made plans for the future. Or at least, I thought we did. About 6 months ago, things started to feel off. Emma became distant. Not in an obvious, dramatic way, but subtle shifts. She was glued to her phone more than usual, laughing at messages she wouldn't share, brushing off my questions with vague answers. She started going on more business trips, sometimes to cities she'd never mentioned before. When I asked about them, she'd get defensive, claiming I was being paranoid. I chalked it up to work stress. We were both busy, and I figured maybe we just needed a weekend away to reconnect, but that weekend never came. Instead, the distance grew, and so did my suspicions. I didn't want to be that guy, the one snooping through his wife's stuff, but when things don't add up, your mind goes to dark places. I tried to push the thoughts away, but they kept creeping back, louder and more persistent. Then came the business trip that changed everything. Emma's business trip was supposed to be a quick 2-day thing, some marketing conference in Indianapolis. Nothing unusual. She packed light, left early Friday morning, and kissed me goodbye like everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. I felt it in my gut. That lingering feeling that something was off had been building for months, and this trip felt like the tipping point. That I spent most of Friday trying to distract myself at work, but my mind kept wandering back to her. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was being irrational. But by the time I got home that evening, the unease was unbearable. I noticed little things: a missed call notification from an unfamiliar number on the landline, a hotel rewards card in her office drawer from a hotel chain that wasn't even in Indianapolis. My stomach churned, but what really set me off was her location sharing on our phones. We'd set it up years ago, more for convenience than anything else. I hadn't thought about it in ages. But that night, something compelled me to check. She wasn't in Indianapolis, her location was showing up in St. Louis. I stared at the screen, blinking, hoping it was some kind of glitch. But it wasn't. She was 300 miles away from where she said she'd be. I called her, my hands shaking. She didn't pick up. Sent me a text a few minutes later, in a meeting. Can't talk right now. No mention of St. Louis. Still pretending she was in Indianapolis. That was the moment I knew that I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. My heart was pounding in my chest, my mind racing with a million thoughts. Who was she with? How long had this been going on? I tried to breathe, but the betrayal felt suffocating. I didn't sleep that night. I kept staring at her location on the map, watching the little dot move around the city. She wasn't at a conference. She was at a hotel, the same one her rewards card was from. Every time I saw that dot shift locations, it felt like a punch to the gut. She lied to my face. And here I was, sitting in our apartment, wondering how I missed the signs. The next morning, I decided I couldn't just sit there. I needed answers. I needed to see it for myself. I packed an overnight bag, told myself I was just going to clear my head, but deep down, I knew exactly what I was doing that I drove to St. Louis in a haze, my mind running through every possible scenario. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was some explanation. But the logical part of me knew the truth. I just needed to see it. When I arrived, her location showed she was still at the hotel. I parked across the street, my heart racing so fast I thought it might explode. I sat there for what felt like hours, debating whether to go in. But before I could make a decision, I saw her. She walked out of the hotel, laughing, her hand resting on the arm of some guy I'd never seen before. He was tall, well-dressed, the kind of guy who oozed confidence. They looked comfortable together, too comfortable. Not coworkers. Not friends. Lovers. I froze, staring at them like I was watching some scene in a movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life unraveling in real time. I didn't confront them. Not then. I couldn't. I felt paralyzed, like if I moved, everything would shatter even more than it already had. I waited until they disappeared down the street before I finally exhaled, the weight of what I'd just seen crashing down on me. I drove back to Chicago in silence, my mind numb. I didn't know what I was going to do, but one thing was clear: the woman I married wasn't the person I thought she was. The drive back to Chicago felt like an out-of-body experience. I don't remember much of it, just the steady hum of the highway beneath my tires and the crushing weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. My hands were clenched around the steering wheel the entire time, knuckles white, as if holding on tighter would somehow keep my world from falling apart. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the house that no longer felt like home. I sat in the car for a few minutes, staring at the front door, wondering how I was supposed to walk inside and pretend like I didn't know. But I wasn't going to pretend. Not anymore. Emma was supposed to come back the next morning, but I wasn't going to wait. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I paced the living room for a while, rehearsing what I was going to say, but nothing felt right. Every word tasted bitter before it even left my mouth. I finally grabbed my phone and called her. She answered on the third ring, her voice light and cheerful, like she wasn't hiding a double life. "Hey, babe. I'm just about to head to bed. How was your day?" Her casual tone was like gasoline on a fire. How could she sound so normal? Like she hadn't just spent the weekend with another man. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Cut the crap, Emma. Where are you?" There was a pause. Just long enough to confirm what I already knew. "I told you, I'm in Indianapolis," she said, but her voice wasn't as confident now. There was an edge to it, like she sensed I wasn't buying it. "No, you're not," I snapped. "You're in St. Louis." "I know, Emma. I saw you." Silence. I could almost hear her brain scrambling for an excuse, a lie that might still salvage the situation. But there was no salvaging this, David. "I can explain." "No," I cut her off, my voice cold and steady. "You're going to come home, and you're going to tell me the truth." "All of it." She didn't respond. Just a heavy sigh, followed by a muttered, "Fine." I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't want to hear another lie. The next 12 hours felt like the longest of my life. I didn't sleep. I just sat there in the living room, staring at the door, replaying every moment of our marriage in my head, trying to figure out when things started falling apart. Had it been like this all along? Was there ever a time when it was real? When Emma finally walked through the door the next morning, she looked tired, like someone who'd spent the entire drive rehearsing her excuses. She dropped her bag by the door and met my eyes, but there was no guilt there. Just defiance. "Okay," she said, arms crossed. "You want the truth? Fine." I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. "I've been seeing Mark for a few months," she admitted, her voice flat, emotionless. "It started during a business trip. We connected, and things just happened. Things just happened." Like she tripped and fell into his arms. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my anger in check. "And all those trips? All those lies? That was you just connecting? She shrugged, like it was no big deal. I didn't plan for it to get serious. But honestly, David, we've been drifting apart for a while. You've been so focused on work, and I needed something more. There it was, the blame shift. As if her betrayal was somehow my fault for being a responsible adult, that I stood up, my hands trembling. So instead of talking to me, you decided to sneak around with some guy from another city? That's your solution? She rolled her eyes. Rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. It's not like I wanted it to happen this way. But it did happen this way. Because she let it. That I didn't have anything else to say. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the person I married. She wasn't even a stranger. She was worse. She was someone I thought I knew, someone I trusted with my heart, and she shattered it without a second thought. I want you out, I said quietly but firmly. Pack your stuff and leave. She looked surprised, like she didn't expect me to react that way. Maybe she thought we'd argue, maybe she thought I'd beg for her to stay. But I was done. Done with the lies, the excuses, the betrayal. Without another word, she turned and went upstairs to pack. I sat back down, staring at the spot where she just stood, feeling a strange mix of anger, sadness, and relief, because as painful as this was, it was also a beginning, the beginning of letting go. The silence after Emma left was deafening. You'd think that after the confrontation, after seeing her pack up her things and walk out the door, I'd feel some sort of relief. But I didn't. All I felt was emptiness. Like the walls of our house were suddenly too wide, too hollow, echoing with memories that now felt tainted. She was gone in under 2 hours. No tears. No last-minute pleas. Just the sound of suitcase wheels dragging across the hardwood floor and the click of the front door shutting behind her. I sat there, listening to that door long after it closed, hoping ridiculously that I'd wake up and realize this was all just a bad dream, but it wasn't. The house smelled like her perfume. The throw blanket she loved was still draped over the back of the couch. Her coffee mug sat in the sink, half rinsed, just like she always left it. Her absence was everywhere, but it wasn't the absence I was mourning. It was the realization that the life I thought we had was a lie. That first night alone was the hardest. I tried to distract myself, put on a game, poured a drink, even tried to read, but none of it stuck. My mind kept replaying everything. The business trips, the missed calls, the way she laughed at her phone like it held secrets I wasn't part of. I kept wondering if there had been a specific moment, a precise second, when she stopped loving me, or if she ever really had. I didn't sleep much. I kept expecting to hear her keys in the door, her footsteps in the hallway. But when the house stayed quiet, the truth sank deeper. She wasn't coming back. And I didn't want her to. The next morning, the weight of it all hit me like a freight train. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the coffee maker, realizing I didn't even know how to make coffee the way she liked it. It was such a small, stupid detail, but it broke me. I wasn't just grieving the loss of Emma, I was grieving the loss of the life we'd built together. The routines, the plans, the shared dreams. It all felt like sand slipping through my fingers. Friends started to notice something was off. I wasn't answering texts, skipping out on after-work drinks, just going through the motions. Finally, my best friend, Jake, cornered me at work. You've been a ghost, man. What's going on? I didn't even try to hide it. Emma cheated on me. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like I was talking about someone else's life. Jake's face darkened, but he didn't push for details. Just clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You don't have to go through this alone." But that's the thing about betrayal, it feels lonely, no matter how many people are around. It's like you're standing in a crowded room, but you're the only one who hears the sound of your world crumbling. That I spent the next few weeks trying to piece myself back together. It wasn't easy. Every room in the house was a minefield of memories. The spot where we danced in the kitchen after too many glasses of wine. The couch where we planned our future trips, trips that would never happen. Even the bed felt like a betrayal. its emptiness mocking me every night that I thought about reaching out to Emma once or twice. Not because I wanted her back, but because I wanted answers. I wanted to understand why. But deep down, I knew even if she told me, it wouldn't make a difference. There's no explanation that makes betrayal easier to swallow. The hardest part wasn't just losing her. It was losing the version of myself who believed in her. But slowly, painfully, I started to reclaim my life. I threw out the things that reminded me of her, rearranged the furniture, repainted the walls. It wasn't about erasing her, it was about creating a space that felt like mine again. That I started running in the mornings, something I hadn't done in years. The first few runs were brutal, my body protested, and my mind kept drifting back to her. But the rhythm of my feet on the pavement, the steady beat of my heart, it grounded me. It reminded me I was still here. Still standing, and that meant something, that I wasn't okay yet. Not by a long shot. But for the first time in weeks, I believed I could be. Healing isn't a straight line. It's messy, unpredictable, and often feels like one step forward, two steps back. Some mornings, I'd wake up feeling like I was finally over it, like Emma and everything that happened was just a distant memory. But then, out of nowhere, something small would hit me like a freight train. A song on the radio we used to sing along to in the car. A restaurant we always ordered from on Friday nights. Even just seeing her favorite cereal at the grocery store would punch the air out of my lungs. It's those tiny, mundane things that hurt the most. But the thing is, the pain started to change. It wasn't as sharp as it used to be. It became more of a dull ache, like a bruise that's healing but still tender when you press on it. I stopped asking myself the same exhausting questions. Why did she do it? When did it start? Was I not enough? Because at some point, you realize those questions don't have satisfying answers. Sometimes, people are just selfish, and it has nothing to do with you. I threw myself into work, trying to fill the empty spaces in my day. It helped, to a point. But distraction isn't the same as healing, and I learned that the hard way. There were nights when the quiet in the house felt suffocating. I'd sit on the couch, staring at the TV without really watching it, wondering how I'd ended up here. Alone. Starting over at 36 when I thought I had my life figured out. Jake convinced me to get out of the house more. He'd drag me to bars, introduce me to people, try to pull me out of my funk. I appreciated it, even if most nights I felt like a ghost hovering over my own life. It's strange how you can be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone. Then one night, something shifted. Jake and I were at this rooftop bar downtown, the kind of place I'd never have gone to on my own. The city lights stretched out in every direction, and for the first time in a while, I felt okay. Not great, not happy. Just okay. And that was enough. That's when I met Hannah. She wasn't like Emma. She wasn't flashy or overly confident. She had this quiet strength about her, the kind of person who didn't need to fill every silence with words. We started talking over some random comment about the overpriced drinks, and before I knew it, we were laughing. I hadn't laughed like that in months. It wasn't forced. It wasn't a distraction. It felt real. We exchanged numbers, but I didn't think much of it. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I wasn't even sure I was ready to date. But a few days later, I found myself texting her. And when she suggested grabbing coffee, I didn't hesitate. Our first coffee date was simple, no pressure. We talked about everything and nothing: our jobs, favorite movies, embarrassing childhood stories. There was no awkwardness, no pretending to be someone I wasn't. And that's when I realized something important. I wasn't broken. I was hurt, sure. But I wasn't beyond repair. Hannah and I kept things casual. We'd meet for drinks, go for walks along the lake, text about random things throughout the day. She knew about Emma. I told her early on, not because I wanted to dump my baggage on her, but because I wanted to be honest. And she never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. She just listened, nodded, and said, "That sucks, but it doesn't define you." And she was right. As weeks turned into months, I noticed something else. The more time I spent with Hannah, the less I thought about Emma. The betrayal that once felt like a heavy weight on my chest started to feel like a distant memory. It was still there, but it didn't control me anymore. One night, after a long walk, Hannah and I sat on a bench by the water, watching the city lights dance on the surface. She turned to me and asked, "Do you still think about her?" I thought about it for a moment. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But it doesn't hurt like it used to." She smiled, squeezing my hand gently. "That's progress." And it was, for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. Not because of Hannah, not because of anyone else. But because I finally realized that my worth wasn't tied to someone else's ability to see it. Emma's betrayal wasn't the end of my story. It was just a chapter. And while it left scars, those scars didn't define me. They reminded me of how far I'd come. Trust is a tricky thing. Once it's broken, even by one person, it has this way of casting shadows over everyone who comes after. That's what I struggled with the most. It wasn't just about getting over Emma's betrayal, it was about learning how to open myself up again without feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to fall. Hannah was patient with me, more patient than I probably deserved. She never pushed for more than I was ready to give, and that made all the difference. But even with her understanding, I couldn't shake the fear that history might repeat itself. Every time her phone buzzed with a message, or she mentioned a male coworker, a small part of me braced for impact. It wasn't fair to her, and I knew it. One evening, we were having dinner at this little Italian place downtown. The kind of cozy spot with dim lighting and just enough noise to make you feel like you're part of the city without being overwhelmed by it. We were mid-conversation about something completely mundane, our favorite TV shows as kids, when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly, then put it back in her bag without saying anything, and just like that, the anxiety crept in. I tried to ignore it, tried to stay present, but my mind spiraled. Who was texting her? Why didn't she mention it? Was she hiding something? I must have gone quiet because she looked up from her plate, her brow furrowed slightly. "Hey, where'd you go?" I forced a smile, shaking my head. "Nowhere, just thinking." She studied me for a moment, then said gently, "You don't have to pretend, David. I can tell when something's bothering you." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's stupid. I know it is. But sometimes, I get in my head. After what happened with Emma, it's hard not to expect the worst, even when I know you're not her." Hannah reached across the table, her fingers curling around mine. "It's not stupid. But you need to know I'm here. And I'm not going to hurt you." Her words were simple, but they hit me hard. Because deep down, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that not everyone was out to break me, that there were still people in the world who could love honestly and fully without deception lurking in the background. But trust isn't something you rebuild overnight. It's a slow, painful process of letting go of the past and giving someone else a chance to prove they're different. Over the next few months, Hannah did just that. She never gave me a reason to doubt her, never made me feel like I was walking on eggshells. And little by little, I found myself relaxing. The walls I'd built around my heart started to come down, brick by brick. I still had moments of doubt. I'd catch myself overthinking, reading into things that didn't deserve a second thought. But every time that happened, I reminded myself that Hannah wasn't Emma. And more importantly, I wasn't the same person I was when Emma left. I was stronger now. More self-aware. I knew my worth, and I wasn't going to let my past dictate my future. One night, we were sitting on my balcony, the city lights twinkling in the distance, when Hannah turned to me and said, "You've changed, you know." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Yeah? How so?" She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "You seem lighter. Like you're not carrying the weight of everything anymore." And she was right. For the first time in a long time, I realized that healing wasn't just about getting over what happened. It was about growing from it. Learning to trust myself again, to believe that I deserved happiness and that one person's betrayal didn't define my ability to love and be loved. Emma was part of my story, but she wasn't the whole story. And sitting there with Hannah, feeling more at peace than I had in years, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be, because life after betrayal isn't just about surviving. It's about thriving. There's something surreal about realizing you've stepped out of survival mode and into something resembling real happiness. It sneaks up on you, quiet and unexpected. One day, you wake up and notice the weight you've been carrying isn't as heavy as it used to be. The shadows from the past don't loom quite as large. And instead of bracing for the next blow, you're finally allowing yourself to breathe. That's where I found myself with Hannah. Our relationship grew in ways I never anticipated. It wasn't rushed or forced. There was no urgency to define what we were or where we were headed. It just felt natural, like we were two people moving in the same direction without needing to push or pull each other along. For the first time since everything happened with Emma, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. One weekend, Hannah suggested we take a road trip to a small town a few hours outside Chicago. It was the kind of spontaneous thing Emma and I never did. Emma always had her schedule, her plans, her carefully curated calendar. But with Hannah, everything felt easy, even the unexpected. We packed up the car with no real itinerary, just a vague idea of exploring, eating too much diner food, and seeing where the road took us. Bruno, my dog, hopped in the back seat, tail wagging like he knew we were heading towards something good. The trip itself wasn't remarkable in the traditional sense. We didn't stumble upon any hidden gems or have any life-altering adventures. But somewhere between the winding roads and bad country music on the radio, I realized something important. I was happy, not the kind of happiness that comes with grand gestures or perfect moments. It was the quiet, steady kind. The kind that settles into your bones and makes you feel at home, no matter where you are. We stopped at a tiny lakeside town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. We found a little bed and breakfast with creaky floors and mismatched furniture. That night, as we sat on the porch, watching the stars reflect off the water, Hannah turned to me and said, "You seem different." I looked at her, the cool night air brushing against my skin. "I feel different." And I meant it. It wasn't just about moving on from Emma. It was about reclaiming parts of myself I didn't even realize I'd lost. The parts that believed in spontaneity, in trust, in the simple joy of sharing a quiet moment with someone who truly saw me. As the weeks turned into months, our lives started to intertwine more. Hannah met my friends, my family, even my coworkers. And with every introduction, I felt more certain that this was the life I was meant to be living. Not the one I'd planned with Emma, but the one I'd found in the aftermath. One evening, back in Chicago, Hannah and I were making dinner in my apartment. Something simple, pasta and a cheap bottle of wine. As we laughed about a cooking mishap, I looked at her and realized I wasn't just over Emma. I was grateful for what had happened, because if Emma hadn't cheated, if she hadn't walked out of our marriage, I would have never discovered this version of myself. The version that knew how to let go, how to trust again, how to find joy in the smallest moments. Hannah caught me staring and raised an eyebrow, smirking. "What's that look for?" I shrugged, grinning. "Just thinking how lucky I am." And I was, not because everything was perfect, but because I'd learned that perfection wasn't the goal. Growth was. And I was growing into someone I was proud of. A few days later, I got an unexpected message from Emma. Just a simple, "Hey, hope you're doing well." No apology, no explanation. Just a reminder that she was still out there, somewhere in the background of my life. But instead of feeling anger or sadness, I felt nothing. Just a quiet acknowledgement that the chapter was closed. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The conversation had ended long before she realized it. That's when I knew I was really free, free from the betrayal, free from the doubt, free from the version of myself that thought I'd never recover, because I had, and in doing so, I'd discovered something even better than closure. I'd found peace. It's strange how life moves on, even when you think it won't. The days blend into weeks, the weeks into months, and before you know it, the things that once felt unbearable become distant memories. That's where I was now, living a life that felt like it belonged to me again. Hannah and I had settled into a rhythm that felt effortless. We weren't rushing toward any milestones, but there was an ease in being together that I hadn't realized I was missing for so long. No hidden agendas, no unspoken doubts. Just two people, navigating life side by side, that I found myself laughing more, sleeping better, and, most importantly, trusting again. Trusting not just Hannah, but myself. Trusting that I could survive heartbreak and still come out the other side whole. One weekend, we decided to host a small get-together at my place, something casual with a few close friends and family. As people trickled in, filling the apartment with laughter and conversation, I realized just how far I'd come. This was the same space where I once felt trapped in the weight of betrayal, but now it was filled with warmth and new memories. At one point, I stepped out onto the balcony to catch my breath, looking out over the city. The lights below flickered like stars, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. No lingering bitterness, no what-ifs, no regrets. Jake came out to join me, handing me a beer. He clinked his bottle against mine with a grin. "You look good, man. Happier than I've seen you in a while." I nodded, taking a sip. "I am." And I meant it. We stood there in comfortable silence for a while before he asked, "Ever think about Emma?" I thought about it for a moment, waiting for any sting of emotion to surface. But there was nothing. Just a distant echo of a past life. "Not really," I said honestly. "She's part of my story, but she doesn't define it." Jake nodded, satisfied with my answer. And I was too, because the truth was, Emma's betrayal had once felt like the end of the world. But it wasn't. It was a beginning. A painful, messy beginning that led me to rediscover who I was and what I deserved. After everyone left that night, Hannah and I curled up on the couch, the quiet of the apartment wrapping around us like a blanket. She rested her head on my chest, her breathing steady and calm. "You okay?" she asked softly. I kissed the top of her head, smiling. "Yeah. Better than okay." Because I was. I'd learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering without the pain. It means carrying the lessons forward without letting them weigh you down. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe Hannah and I will build a life together, maybe we won't. But what I do know is that I'm no longer afraid of the unknown. I'm excited for it, because life isn't about avoiding heartbreak. It's about embracing the journey, knowing that even in the darkest moments, there's a path forward, and I'm walking it head high, heart open, and ready for whatever comes next. If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here, feeling not just okay but genuinely happy, I would have laughed in their face. Back then, I couldn't see past the wreckage. Everything felt permanent, like the betrayal, the pain, the confusion were etched into my identity. But here's the thing no one tells you when your world falls apart: the pain doesn't last forever. It changes you, yes. But it doesn't have to define you. Hannah and I had fallen into a rhythm that felt effortless. There was no tension, no hidden undercurrents of distrust. I wasn't waiting for her to mess up or hurt me. I wasn't holding my breath, bracing for another betrayal. For the first time in a long time, I was fully present in my life. And it felt damn good. One Saturday morning, we decided to take a spontaneous trip out to the lake. Just us, a couple of sandwiches, and Bruno trotting along beside us, his tail wagging like he didn't have a care in the world. The sky was a brilliant blue, the kind of day that makes you forget there's ever been bad weather. As we walked along the shoreline, our hands brushing occasionally before naturally intertwining, I realized something profound. I wasn't thinking about Emma. Not in the background, not in the quiet spaces of my mind. She wasn't lingering in the corners of my heart like a ghost. She was gone. Her chapter in my story had closed, and I wasn't flipping back the pages anymore. Hannah must have sensed the shift in me because she squeezed my hand gently and said, "You've been quiet. What's on your mind?" I paused, taking in the peaceful scenery before turning to her. "I think I've finally let it go," I said. "All of it." She smiled, that warm, understanding smile that had become one of my favorite things about her. "I'm proud of you." And I was proud of me too. Because letting go isn't just about moving past the person who hurt you. It's about forgiving yourself for the time you spent holding on to the pain. It's about realizing that the betrayal wasn't a reflection of your worth, but of their choices. When we got back to the apartment later that day, I found myself pulling out an old box I'd shoved into the back of my closet months ago. It was filled with remnants of my life, with Emma photos, cards, little keepsakes from trips we'd taken. I sat on the floor, sifting through it all, waiting for the sting that used to accompany these memories, but the sting never came. Instead, I felt a strange kind of gratitude. Not for the betrayal, but for the journey it forced me to take. Because without that heartbreak, I wouldn't have discovered this version of myself. The one who knows how to set boundaries. The one who understands his own value. The one who isn't afraid to love again, fully and unapologetically. I tossed most of the stuff in the trash, keeping only a couple of things that felt more like artifacts from a past life than emotional anchors. I didn't need to erase Emma completely. She was part of my story, after all. But she didn't have power over me anymore. That evening, as Hannah and I sat on the balcony with a couple of beers, watching the sun dip below the skyline, I turned to her and said, "You know, I used to think Emma's betrayal was the worst thing that ever happened to me." She raised an eyebrow, curiosity dancing in her eyes. "And now?" I took a sip of my beer, letting the moment settle. "Now, I think it was the best thing." She didn't say anything at first, just reached over and rested her hand on my knee, her touch grounding me. Funny how life works like that, huh? And it really is. We spend so much time fearing the worst: heartbreak, loss, betrayal, thinking those things will break us beyond repair. But what I've learned is that those are the moments that shape us. They strip away the illusions and force us to confront who we really are, and who I really am. I'm stronger. I'm wiser. I'm happier, not because everything worked out perfectly, but because I learned how to find peace in imperfection. Because I stopped measuring my life by the people who walked out and started appreciating the ones who stayed and the one who stuck with me through it all, myself. As the night stretched on, Hannah rested her head on my shoulder, and we sat in comfortable silence, the city buzzing softly below us. I realized then that happiness isn't some grand, elusive thing. It's in the quiet moments, the ordinary days, the unexpected connections. It's in the decision to keep going, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. It's in the courage to open your heart again, knowing it could get broken. It's in the realization that even when people betray you, they can't take away your capacity to love and be loved. That's what I've found with Hannah. But more importantly, that's what I've found within myself. And as I sat there, the cool night air brushing against my skin, I knew one thing for sure: the best chapters of my life weren't behind me. They were just beginning. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that life rarely goes according to plan. And that's not a bad thing. The twists, the heartbreaks, the unexpected detours, they shape us in ways we never anticipate. They strip away the comfortable illusions and force us to confront who we really are beneath the surface. A year ago, I thought my life was over. Emma's betrayal felt like a death sentence to everything I'd built and believed in. But now, sitting here reflecting on it all, I realize it wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Hannah and I didn't rush anything. There was no need to. What we had wasn't built on the urgency to fill a void. It grew out of mutual respect, understanding, and a shared appreciation for the simple, genuine things in life. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real. And after everything I'd been through, real was exactly what I needed. We moved in together 6 months after that road trip to the lake. It felt natural, like the next step in a journey we were both walking with open eyes and open hearts. The apartment didn't feel like a space haunted by the past anymore. It felt like home. A home we built together, one memory at a time. But the most profound change wasn't in my relationship with Hannah, it was in my relationship with myself. I'd spent so much time defining my worth by my role as a husband, by the success of my marriage, that I'd forgotten who I was outside of those titles. Emma's betrayal forced me to find that person again. The one who loved photography, who found peace in morning runs, who valued quiet moments just as much as loud adventures. I reconnected with old friends I'd drifted from, pursued hobbies I'd long forgotten, and most importantly, I learned to enjoy my own company. There's a unique kind of strength that comes from being comfortable alone, not because you have to be, but because you want to be. One evening, as Hannah and I were unpacking boxes in our new apartment, I found an old journal tucked away in a drawer. It was from the early days after Emma left, pages filled with anger, confusion, and heartbreak. I flipped through it, half expecting to feel that same sting, but instead, I felt gratitude. Gratitude for how far I'd come, gratitude for the lessons I'd learned, gratitude for the pain that pushed me to grow. I showed the journal to Hannah, and she read a few passages before looking up at me with soft eyes. "You've come a long way," she said. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle deep in my chest. "Yeah, I have. Because healing isn't just about moving on from the person who hurt you. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you lost along the way. It's about realizing that you are more than your mistakes, more than your heartbreaks, more than the people who couldn't see your worth." I no longer saw Emma as the villain in my story. She was just a chapter, a necessary one, albeit painful. Without her betrayal, I wouldn't have discovered the resilience I didn't know I had. I wouldn't have met Hannah. I wouldn't have become the man I am today. One day, out of the blue, Emma sent me a message. It was brief, just a simple, "I hope you're doing well." A year ago, that message would have sent me spiraling. But now? It was just words on a screen. I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt nothing. And that's how I knew I was free. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say. The conversation had ended long before she realized it. As I sit here now, looking out over the city that once felt like it was closing in on me, I realized that the best parts of life aren't the ones you plan. They're the ones that surprise you, the ones that force you to grow in ways you never expected. I'm not the same person I was when Emma walked out of my life. I'm better, not because someone else came in and fixed me, but because I did the hard work of fixing myself. Because I faced the pain head on, sat with it, learned from it, and then let it go. So if you're reading this, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again, you will. It won't happen overnight. It won't happen without effort. But it will happen, because the end of one chapter is just the start of another, and trust me, the best chapters are often the ones you never saw coming.